Well, welcome back to some of you to the Pulse stage, and welcome for the first time here to the Pulse stage for our next discussion, which will explore how UK manufacturers are really putting tech into use, with case studies from leading British manufacturers and practical tips on the implementation of data, IoT, AI and automation technologies. Now, we have a fantastic panel for you here today, and chairing the panel will be Simon Pritchard, a visionary leader who for over 2 decades has served as CEO of Philtronics Limited, driving innovation in precision electronics manufacturing for the global semiconductor and wafer fabrication sectors. Please put your hands together and welcome Simon and our panellists to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's talk. My name is Simon Pritchard. I've spent 30 years in manufacturing, 10 years in OEM, supply chain, 20 years in Philtronics. I think the idea of today's speech is going to be to give the panel enough time to talk about a really interesting topic. So let's start off by some introductions. Let's start with Zen.
Good morning, all. So my name is Zen. I head the supply chain and automations at British Rototherm. We design most accurate precision instruments on planet Earth. My background has always been in operations from day one. So unlike Simon, I only worked for about 15 years in operations, but my passion is in automation. So what we're doing at Rototherm is trying to build a tech center of excellence in Wales to have the most advanced factory in Wales as well. Thank you.
Perfect.
Hi everyone, I'm Steph. I have been fighting the good fight on automation and digitization for manufacturing now for about 10 years from the outside in. Manufacturing is an incredibly important sector, and through work in Ireland, through to South Wales, and then at Microsoft helping across some of our biggest manufacturers in the UK and internationally. It's been an area of significant passion and frustration, and hopefully some time here today will help people who clearly already understand the goal, because you wouldn't be here if you didn't think automation, digitization and so on in manufacturing wasn't a good thing. So hopefully today we'll arm you with some facts and some insights that will help you go into your places of work and make a difference and be the change. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Matt Patching. I work at WMG on manufacturing automation and digitalization. My background is automotive. I've been working on assembly processes to start with, and then moved into a more research-focused area. The catapult centres that we work with together as a network are focused on understanding industry's needs and challenges, and then trying to address those with collaborative research and development projects. So my focus on those has largely been on digitalisation and helping that adoption within industry.
Good morning, Andy Silcox. I'm the CTO at the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre, a sister organisation in the high value manufacturing catapult to WMG. My background, I'm an unashamed robot nerd, so I've been in the automation game for 25 years. Joined the catapult 10 years ago, and really our prime focus is using our expertise and kit to help companies de-risk their investment in new technology.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm always conscious of time on panels, and I want to give the guys as much time as possible to talk. So what we're going to do is slightly different. We're going to focus on quite open-ended questions, really, just to give the panelists time to tailor the responses to the expertise. So the first question is going to be quite open-ended, but hopefully the guys will tailor accordingly. Let's start with the people puzzle, which I'm sure a lot of people in this room will be the first part of any challenge. How does people and culture are impacted by digital transformation and AI in manufacturing? So quite open-ended, but I think you all have a different view on that from Zen heavily in operations all the way through. So should we start with Andy?
So the biggest issue I've found in putting automation into shop floors is trust and trust in the system. So you get a lot of people within the business fearful that the automation or the digital solution is coming to take their job, and that's not the case. You just have to demonstrate that it is of value and it will help them. There's also a lack of trust in the management of the business on actually the results of the automation. Give you a better example of what I mean. We don't get the full value out of the automation because we still don't trust the results of what it produces, and so we still look at a quality system that was designed for manual processes, not taking into account the improvement that the automation gives, and adapting those validation processes to suit the automation so we get the full benefit. So what I often see is we may improve productivity on a particular part where the automation is being applied, but actually the overall system doesn't improve at all because we haven't updated the quality systems and the validation alongside it. So that trust and looking at the whole production system as a whole is really fundamental to getting successful automation into your factories.
Yeah, I'd follow up on that, say that digitalization and to an extent automation is a change process, and it's having that cultural mindset. So you're going to need the skills to deliver that change, but also you're going to need some champions in the business that understand that. And as with any kind of change, if it's a new process, if it's a new product, you'd prototype that first as well, wouldn't you? So when it's coming to digitalization, that prototyping, fast failure mentality is really important. You're not going to build a good culture around solution if you go really big, have a high expectation, and then you don't get the outcome that you're expecting. So having that having that mindset in place means that you've got some champions that will sponsor this, will understand that it may not happen exactly as expected, but you'll learn from it. And then coming from that skills piece, ultimately I think that will come and everyone will, skills profiles will change over time. But in the short term, you can collaborate with industry experts. There are communities of practice that are available. You can learn from each other. But the one thing you can own is having that champion internally that will support these change processes.
Perfect.
So thinking on this and trying to build tools for manufacturers over the past 6 years, and one of the things that we've kind of consistently come up against with the people problem in all of this is manufacturers are generally highly multi-generational businesses with people from, I think, Simon, you're saying 17 to 70?
Yep.
And not a lot of people change jobs, actually. You find a manufacturer that you enjoy, and I know so many people who are still working there 20, 30 years later in the same organization. And because people come in with varying skill levels and they stay in the same organization, they don't learn about the ways that lots of other people are doing. There's not necessarily a strong onus on building a community of practice around themselves. And so they end up with a fairly strong belief in this is the way we've done it, so this is the way we're going to continue to do it. And that is also quite safe. There's low risk associated with it, especially in the short term. And that's both for the individuals working in the manufacturer and the leadership teams who are, engineers and things by trade, who think hard numbers. But it's a real big challenge. So you need to think about how do you invest in your team to help them see the advantage of not just doing things the way they've always done it, And that can be really hard things, like teaching people how to use tablets, combating potential literacy issues. If you're hiring a lot of people from abroad, because that's the only way you can get the skills inside your manufacturer, then you have a language barrier. There are a lot of challenges that your people will face day in, day out, that make it even harder for them to accept digital technologies that are going to make their life different. So you really need to think about how are you helping people take some of those first steps that you might have taken years or decades ago into embracing change for themselves and their organization. And it really isn't something I think we can ever understate or underestimate, is how much effort that is, but it's so incredibly worthwhile. So we had one production manager who's in his late 50s. His wife also works at the manufacturer. He's got teenage sons. And because of the lack of digitization in the company, he was coming in on the Saturday to type things up. And getting him through that journey to go, okay, so I can take a scan, I can upload something, and you'll give me the data. And him realizing he now no longer has to come in on a Saturday daytime by learning this process meant that he was able to have all of those Saturdays back with his wife and his family and make a material difference to his life. He enjoys his job more, he enjoys his home life more. And that's the kind of change that we can make, but we have to take people through a lot of those really early steps before they can realize that they can have a different experience.
Oh, I got one. So I think it's important to invest into your people and culture. There's a really famous gentleman called Masayoshi Son, is a CEO of SoftBank, and he predicts that in 10 years' time, AI will be 10,000 times smarter than a human. Even if it's 1,000 times smarter, we have to be prepared to invest into our workforce to secure a future for them. A good example at Rototherm, what we've done is we wanted to automate our welding process. I'm not a welder, so why should I make the decision of going and spending 100 odd grand on a new robot? We gave that money to our welder. We call him Dan the welder. We gave him 100K and said, you're the expert now. So not only we got the right tools for the automation, but we also upskilled Dan. So Dan now is a programmer of the actual robotic tool. So Dan's future is secured, so we invested into Dan. And we're doing this across the entire business, from the digital side of things like ERP data entry, where we're training people on how to build their own tools suitable for their jobs to become experts, upskilling them, they learning new skills. So even if they leave our organization, they're bringing that knowledge across the Wales and across the entire UK to be a step further above the competition. So again, if we don't invest into our people today, there won't be any jobs for them tomorrow. So you have to be really careful and drive investment through the culture.
So what I'm hearing across the panel is the same message that says that people adopting digitalization, naturally the perception is going to be that it's going to replace their jobs. I think from an operational perspective, you and I are very similar with that challenge. Have you got any examples of how you've circumvented that by changing the perception that clearly this efficiency saving is going to replace you, rather than actually give you more time and space to advance in strategy or more of what a manager should be doing?
Yeah, so I give you an example of a lady who works in stores in a warehouse, and then I'll talk about my personal sort of example. So Helen just pushes a trolley the entire day for 3 hours. 3 hours through the day, she pushes a trolley. Now that's a very expensive person to pay. We're paying about 35 grand a year to push a trolley. So we bought a robot that delivers the products through the entire company. And the first thing Helen came up to me, she ran up to me saying, "Oh, can I have a little one-to-one?" I said, "Yeah, what's the problem?" And she started crying because she was like, "You're trying to fire me." I'm like, no. We're trying to make your life easier. So we kind of learned from that mistake. We try to find out what Helen likes to do. So again, we're investing into Helen. I'm letting her down, that I'm not challenging her, because all what she does is pushes a trolley. So now Helen does stock counts. She's the only person I've met in my career who loves counting stock. And our stock accuracy is 99.5% through entire plant. And that's because we invest into Helen, we're giving her the skill sets and challenged her to do her job. So Helen is not bored just pushing a trolley. Again, it sounds a bit stupid, but Helen used to push a trolley. That's it. I'm disrespecting my employees by giving them shit jobs, basically. Does that answer your question,
Yeah, I think
Simon?
so. I think the theme I was trying to pull on around the people puzzle, what's been particularly challenged for us as a business with 100 employees ranging from 17 to 70 is engaging them in, they're all at different proficiency levels of competency in IT, but you have to put a really robust system in place that reflects that naturally the 17-year-old is not the most IT proficient, the 70-year-old may be. And naturally, the defense mechanisms and the barriers come up to say, I know what this means. Your efficiency savings means job loss, where changing that perception from onset that it is not about job loss, it's about you having more time and space to do the things that we want you to do, which is the top 5% of flexibility, adaptability, and being able to react to the customer quite quickly. So for me personally, probably similar to your experiences, the first part of this would be, instead of calling it a continuous improvement plan, for example, we may have called it a digitalization plan. And the first part of that journey would be, let's call it go paperless. Because naturally people will start considering how much pieces of paper they're using, but the nature of what we do in there is process mapping and understanding efficiencies therein. But if you're giving somebody more space and time, if you're removing the admin, which is what AI is supposed to be doing, is removing administration tasks, allowing other people to get onto the pathways to get to the next level. So I think that probably leads us into my follow-up question. And the same theme, I want it to be quite a generic open question. And I'm going to frame it as practical advice for getting started with automation and digitalization, including some lessons learned and recommendations for the group here. I think ultimately we got a short time together. I want the panel, the audience to walk away with maybe 1 to 3 things as a takeaway. So practical advice for getting started, including lessons learned, and maybe some recommendations for anybody that's already on the journey or is yet to start the journey. And should we start with you, Andy?
Okay. So it was drummed into me at the start of my career in automation. You don't automate rubbish. So I could take you to robot cells I've put in over the years that gather dust based on a ME's opinion of what needed to be done inside the factory with no data to back that up. The first question I ask now is what impact do you want to have from the change you're making? And then look at what processes affect that and can give you that impact. Then when you look at those processes, are those processes stable in the first instance? If not, make them stable. And then are they as lean as they can be? And if not, if they're not lean, make them lean. So don't, before you make any investment, before you put any money down, look at that. Don't just think, I've got 3 people working on that part of the line. If I put a robot there, I'm going to make X amount of saving. As I mentioned before, you've got to look at the system in its totality. You can just move the bottleneck somewhere else in your factory if you don't think about it and look at it with a logical mind. So that is the key to it. That's where the success comes, is those companies who have looked at their whole system and looked at where the biggest impact can come from and use data to back that up. I'm an evangelist for process modelling and using tools like discrete event simulation. Let the data decide where your investment should be. Let it not be a hunch or a best guess, no matter how experienced your engineer is.
I think that's a very valid point, isn't it? Is if we were putting in a new ERP or you're putting MRP systems in, the first thing you'd be doing is getting the information right and making sure the data you're putting in is correct in the first instance, and being transparent about that in the sense that you can't just jump in and want MRP to be fully automated. You need the data in correct from onset. So where you start your journey, maybe like I've alluded to previously, which would be, let's remove paper from the process. But along the way, you're mapping what data exists and how it needs to be improved, because building on a bad foundation is a recipe for disaster when you're trying to get people to adopt to something that the collective around you will be happy if it failed because told you so. So you have to really put the hard miles in from the onset. So yeah, really, really good point.
I suppose my thoughts are very similar, and it would come down to being intentional with how you're digitalizing. So a risk with these systems is that you can develop data overload or a data swamp. You go out and you try and capture as much information as possible, as much data points as possible. You haven't thought about what the purpose of that data is, and then you lose all the value in there. So similar kind of thoughts when you're looking for a case again. Try and find something that you can prototype, fail fast with, is relatively low risk, and try and build the culture around, and specifically look at what is the reactions that you're trying to drive, what are the changes, and then go and find the specific data relative to that. You do need to have a bit of a strategy, you do need to have that forward view about how does this all link together, what's the end point, how do my systems scale and are interoperable. But again, you need having that long-term view doesn't work if you don't build the momentum and the early wins at the start. So yeah, certainly be intentional with your data and your projects, and try to avoid the data swamp.
Yeah, perfect. I'll make the analogy back to my business as well, if you like, in terms of, yes, you want to create these data lakes. You want to, when you start collecting data, then it's going to spin off other process benefits. But giving the team an easy win to buy into it is core for it, because naturally there's a perception that is anti what you're trying to do. And something like paperless for us was a very easy one to give the team a win. But also what we learned from just process mapping every bit of paper that went around the factory, the spin-offs and the learnings weren't the actual purpose of what we were trying to do. It actually opened the mind to, the whole team embraced it and went, yeah, why have we got this piece of paper? Why are we doing this? So yeah, definitely giving the team the early wins, and certainly not taking your eye off of what the data creates is maybe not the original goal, but once you've got the data, it actually opens the door to a much wider picture.
I think recapping what's been said so far, it's very clear. Like, have a bold ambition, but start small and start with something that's okay to fail. And what that usually means, in my experience, is you don't mess with your critical processes. Find the people who are the managers, the operatives, the back office staff who are who know so much about your business, who are key people, who are too busy to make the kind of improvements you know they can make. They'll often also be potentially some of your most conservative people, or people who are least likely to try and digitize or automate something. So working closely with these people, bringing them on side, not only helps unlock all the amazing knowledge and capability that they have, but also turns probably the biggest blockers to the big goal into your early evangelists, who will help speed up the process by years, because they'll have gone through the transformation. And by seeing some of the most conservative people embrace it, then it becomes easier for other people to do so. So they lead by example. So big goal, start small, start with the people who are critical to the business and are also potentially quite anti the initiative.
Certainly agree with that as well, in the thought process that says we picked the most robust, solid department to start the process in. One, because it naturally had pioneers and early adapters, but secondly, the risk was low to put some new things in that process. So we had some quick wins because they wanted it. So naturally the thought process may be amongst the group to pick the department that's performing the worst, because those are low-hanging fruit that you may solve. However, to your point, the same, it's like, no, actually, pick something that is low risk, that can be improved, and is quite robust. And we picked our accounts department for that process. Is that I'm a bean counter, so I knew that department was the most solid. So we definitely had some early wins from that. And what that highlighted to the rest of the cohort was the company's moving ahead. This department is a good department, now it's a better department. So the other departments are going to be left behind. And it just created a little bit of competition in between departments that said, well, why did they get it? And so, yeah, it's definitely a valid point. Have you seen something similar, Jen? Or?
Yeah, so I think everybody mentioned already facts and data. So water is wet, rocks are hard. You need to gather the data on what you're going to automate. I don't know, at beginning of the journey, you're probably going to have 2,000,001 things that wants automating. How do you know that it's right? In our department, we made like a framework, a decision tree, so we know exactly what we're going to automate. But it's important to, like mentioned, remove the waste first. Otherwise, you're just going to keep automating waste, so you'll be creating more problems for yourself. So yeah, look at the facts and data, find the easiest value stream to enter. So your repeat processes that have already got a buy-in or a nice team that's working there, and start with them. So start small, but equally don't be afraid to start. I think lots of companies I've spoken to, they kind of either get overwhelmed or they don't know where to start. Just start automating your emails. Just start with something basic. Plant the seed in your organization. It'll grow and flourish.
One of the things we talked about earlier in the week was giving your AI robots names and humanizing them. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we got a couple of robots in a factory and also a couple of AI agents. We call them employees. We treat them as actual humans. So we put a picture of somebody's face. We actually ask ChatGPT to create the picture, and we give him human names. It encourages the interaction on a shop floor. So if I'm walking through my shop floor and somebody comes up to me and says, oh, I'm using ChatGPT 5.0, what does that mean? Where am I going to find it? We named our bot Alfred. So you get people come up to me saying, oh, I've spoken to Alfred today. It breaks that barrier, makes it a bit of fun to speak to. And for the automations team, we actually treat them as genuine employees. So they are on our organizational chart. We have monthly one-to-ones with them to learn about the data that they are producing. So then the more data is clean and correct, going back to actual shop floor. So yeah, humanize it, have a bit of fun with it.
And we talked a little bit, Steph, about fail fast, which everyone seems to be mentioning now, which I find quite funny. Going back to the gaming industry 30 years ago, it was a standard principle that we all adopted to. But failing fast, when a business is used to being measured on deliverables, KPIs, you have to hit your KPIs. Because it's the Wild West with AI and technology is starting to come in, there has to be a culture change within the business to say, no, you can fail, because what we'll learn more from failure, we'll learn more from that. But it's changing the employee's view that they haven't failed.
Yeah, I think it's the learning 1,000 ways not to build a light bulb is really important. And actually, we find so many people who, there's a new button in the tool they use, and they don't press it. How many of you don't press the new button because you're scared of breaking things? So many people. But that new button, the person who built it probably realizes if it's dangerous, they're going to give you a confirm step and tell you, oh, this is going to delete stuff. Are you sure? Right? So we need to kind of build that willingness to press the button. It does start with de-risking it as a manager. You need to, as a leader, you need to be able to say, hey, I want you to go try something. I want you to go buy that 100 grand robot. If it doesn't work out, that's not 100 grand you've wasted. That's 100 grand we've invested in learning how to do robotics. And so we need to reframe these things from a top-down perspective. And again, like when I was talking about getting your most conservative people on side, you can get them to take ownership of something and build up that that capability of taking accountability and ownership to grow something. The other thing that I think is worth considering on this topic is if you don't experiment, if you don't set any budget aside for research and development, and given like most research never pans out, like pharmaceutical drug discovery, 19 out of 20 drug discovery processes fail to find a meaningful drug. But pharmaceuticals will still spend on those 19 ones that failed. They just want to try and get the process up to 18 failing out of 20, right? If you're not setting aside that money, if you're not investing in learning what doesn't work as much as what does, then you as a company will be left behind. You have to invest knowing that some of your investments are not going to succeed. You cannot have a zero risk policy around research and development. It will never work out for you as a business.
I think what it pulls on is an interesting part of the conversation that maybe Andy and Matthew can jump in on. Collaboration and funding, and what advice could you give people around the room that naturally in Wales we are relationship builders. We don't like transactional relationships and leaning into Wales because that's a key strength of ours. But what advice could you give anybody for collaborating and what funding is available? And some of the good things that can come from that is, like in manufacturing Wales, 3 of us already work together, so we actually do collaborate, share best practice and knowledge, and we're comfortable doing that. But the funding aspect and the collaboration, how important is that?
There's basically a lot of help out there for you. The UK government has invested in a large amount of capability, both in terms of kit and in both expertise within academia and with the catapult centres. That's available for you to come and use, and that gives you the ability to de-risk that investment. You can test things in a safe environment and get to a better answer. Funding is available to support that, which pays for our time if you're using us. But it also, we have the ability to see similar problems. And so we will see that you're looking to automate a particular process, but we'll know that somebody else in maybe an unrelated industry has got the same problem, and we can bring you together and look at collaborative R&D programs where you're both getting the same result and getting more leverage for your funding you're putting in.
Yeah, I think whenever I do these type of things, what's a common problem is we live in silos, and industry will solve a problem, and sectors within an industry will solve a problem, and they're centric to that sector unless there's a join-up network that collaborates and pushes the best practice. And what's key for me is, given that it is the Wild West at the moment, that there are reputable people out there that are selling the right expertise and the right knowledge that is earned from a scar, and it's having the right cohort of people around you. I think we are running out of time to a degree, and I really wanted to give the audience a Q&A session, so maybe we could start with that. Any questions from the panel?
Can I ask people to use the microphone as well so everybody can be heard? So if anybody's got questions, anybody? Ah, yes. Thank God for that.
I just wanted to pick up on what Steph was saying about sometimes you have to target the most conservative people, and I just wondered if any of you got some stories of remarkable transformation of people you thought would never, ever accept digitalisation.
So yes, I put a robot system into a big aerospace manufacturer back at the start of the 2000s. The hostility was palpable, and it took a very, very long time to win them over. The answer was involving them in the process, in designing and developing the solution. So did that, and then they started to see benefits, and then through that process started to suggest other areas, other things that the robot system could do that would make their jobs even easier. So the example was they would suit up every day, full breathing apparatus, and trim the part we were working on with a Dremel. Really horrible job, really noisy, and then worked out, well, okay, if we change what's on the end of the robot, when the robot's finished doing its primary task, it can go and do that. Job done. So yeah, that's one particular example, but yeah, I've had cases where they've refused to talk to me.
Just add into that, I mean, I employ 100 people from 17 to 70 in a factory environment, so you're going to get the whole range of spectrum between somebody that's come from academia or somebody who's just come from hairdressing. My experience in it is involving them in the process. And once you involve them in the process, and we're going to get the naysayers that this can't possibly change. I've been doing it like this for 20 years. You can't tell me and teach me anything. Making them part of the process, and to a degree, will embolden them to make it sound as if it's their idea and it's their win. And that's what the net result for us was, is that you're sitting there and they are solutionizing the problem that they perceived didn't exist. So there's a couple of case studies we've done like that, which are quite interesting, where, you know, even getting them to use a tablet instead of a piece of paper is a challenge, because you can't possibly do it at the speed of a piece of paper. And I've made all these notes, and I can't use to push a change through. So yeah, there's plenty of. Have you seen any, Steph?
I was going to say, yeah, like, I love the examples that work. One of the things that I would say is, as well, is in some organizations we've had success just saying, okay, the person who is most anti-change is going to retire in 2 years. Their department is not the bottleneck in our business, so we're going to leave it until we've built up success and momentum elsewhere and the biggest naysayer and blocker retires. So obviously, I would love it if we can convert everybody and help give everybody the impetus to make their jobs better and enjoy things. But sometimes it's not always going to be practical, and that can be a people's strategy decision where, you know, they might not be the right fit for the organization any longer. Sometimes you might have to be a little blunt about that, and sometimes you might just be able to wait, and because time solves a lot of problems. So as much as I want everybody to win, sometimes wait and see is an acceptable strategy.
Questions?
You've all touched upon, I guess, the theme of people in your organisation saying AI is going to take my jobs. Have you got any more practical examples of how you're counter the narrative going on in the media when you've got Amazon ditching 14,000 jobs, Verizon like 30,000 jobs last week, whatever it might be? There's a huge job loss, and a lot of those big organisations are attaching it to AI, even if that's not the full story. So when you're having those conversations internally, what other things are you doing to communicate that's not the case, alongside the kind of all the practical examples you've given today?
From a selfish perspective, I'll come at it from an SME angle. It's very topical at the moment, supply chains and SMEs, and the agility, the adaptability, and the speed that we can react at compared to some larger operations. So it's promoting to my staff internally that upskilling is part of the journey. We just become better at what we're doing. The cohort stays the same, but we just become better. But it's always that change part that people are resistant to. But it's being positive about that change and saying to them, look, this isn't about next week you're not going to be here. Next week you're going to be doing something you really want to do, rather than the continuous rhetoric, which would be, I can't do that because I'm doing this. But it's that administration part I think is critical, is that it's there to replace the boring, mundane tasks, not the stuff that we're all passionate about. And I think that was key for me.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give you an example of this lady who does sales. So she's a sales admin, and exactly AI replaced 99% of her job of sales admin, of putting the sales in. The difficulty is trying to find what will add the value to the customer. So in that particular area, she's really good at, speaking, facing the people. So she's now on the road, speaking to the customer face to face, having those, meetings that AI can't take away from humans. I think we as leaders have this amazing opportunity of brainstorming, of trying to decipher what is the value add, what we can replace, that time that is lost due to AI. Yeah.
I think it's also important to understand that AI and automation or robots are tools. If they're not pointed at a problem, if they're not directed, they don't do anything. And complement that with the understanding what their limitations are, and therefore what that frees up in people. Like a robot will do the same thing over and over again to infinity, but it doesn't know if it's the right thing or the wrong thing to be doing. But it's these people that are working in their areas, have a specific knowledge that maybe the process isn't correct in the first place, and they've been doing it differently because it's the right thing. They have that knowledge, they have that creativity, they have that ability to adapt to change, and it's understanding that they can be empowered by the tools to do the things that they're good at, to do the things they enjoy, make sure that that's part of the messaging as you bring them along the journey.
I think we were just chatting before we came onto a stage with Matt, and Matt said something really that stuck with me, saying that in 10 years' time, we're all going to be philosophers. So we're not going to be doing the day-to-day donkey work. We're going to be thinking about how to improve it, and that's where the value add is.
Yeah, I think I'd coin it with businesses, relationships, and AI is not a relationship-based process. So for us, it's very much leaning into how could we get our staff doing the things they're really passionate about. We all talked about skills gaps historically, and where the people these days need to be passionate about what they're doing. There's more demand than there is supply. So how do we empower the staff to know that there's a solution to do the horrible stuff that no one wants to do, and you can concentrate on the good stuff that actually you're here to do.
One last thing, because I don't think there's any current questions, so I can gab until there are.
We've got time for one more question.
Yeah.
Got 4 minutes left.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So just quickly, in 2023, American R&D tax law changed. So in the UK, and what used to happen in the US is whatever you spent in R&D, you could get a bunch of money back off your taxes. That changed so that that amount actually you'd get back over like 10 years. That meant investment in technologists, research folks, engineers, and the speculative investment into businesses became a lot less cost effective. All of a sudden, we start seeing a lot of engineering, research, and development people getting laid off in the American offices. And then because you can't just say we're going to lay people off in America, it trickled down to elsewhere. So a lot of actual job loss, whilst they could achieve potentially comparable results by leveraging AI more, they're taking away those staff because it is not cost effective to have quite so many staff anymore. So it is one of those things that we have to be very intentional when we're thinking about what we ask government for, that we don't have unintended consequences of things like making R&D less palatable.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Well, I think one of the first things I need to do after this session is ask Simon and the guys to move me away from my bit of paper and onto a tablet after listening to that. But fantastic session from all of you. I think really good to talk about some of those things about investing in real people, about, issues with sort of jobs and job losses that are in the press. And I think, like you say, Helen is an example of lots of people out there. So really nice to hear some positivity around that. So thank you all so much for joining us. Sorry there weren't time for more questions, but great to get some of your questions out there. Thank you to all of you guys. You've been fab.